The moment the door slammed behind him, the biker felt something inside his chest break in a way he hadn't felt in years. The restaurant's fluorescent lights, once warm and inviting, now glared harshly over the empty booth where his autistic son still sat trembling, his small hands gripping the edge of the table. A few minutes earlier, the boy had been smiling softly at the waitress who had knelt beside him, soothing him through a sensory overload episode with gentle hands and a patience rarely found in strangers. And now, because of that act of kindness, because she chose compassion over speed, over the restaurant's rigid timing rules, she had been fired right there in front of them. No hesitation. No mercy. No understanding of what it meant to calm a child who struggled every day to navigate a world too loud, too bright, too unpredictable. The biker stood frozen, heat surging in his chest, the humiliation and helplessness swirling into a storm that tasted like old pain he thought he had buried years ago. If you believe the world needs more kindness, empathy, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to channel name. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. For a long moment, he just stood there, watching his son rock gently back and forth, humming a small tune he used to soothe himself. The biker remembered all the times he had seen people stare at his child in public, misunderstanding his movements, judging his meltdowns, whispering about bad parenting or misbehavior. But this waitress, this girl with soft eyes and a tired smile, had understood in an instant. She noticed his son getting overwhelmed by the noise, the crowd, the smells. She didn't flinch at his stimmying. She didn't rush him. She simply knelt, talked softly, brought him ice water, dimmed the lights above their table, and created a bubble of calm around his child. And she had done all of this while clearly exhausted herself, moving with the kind of heaviness that comes from working too many shifts and carrying burdens no one talks about. As he reached out to take his son's hand, the biker felt a deep sense of failure, not because he couldn't stop the firing, but because he had let his son witness it. The boy didn't fully understand what had happened, but he felt the tension, the raised voices, the coldness of the manager's words. He sensed the injustice in the air. And the biker, a man who had survived things most people never even imagined, felt powerless in a situation that mattered more than any fight he had ever been in. He guided his son outside into the fading afternoon light. The sun was warm, the wind gentle, but inside his mind there was nothing but storm. He buckled his son into the sidecar of his modified motorcycle slowly, carefully, making sure the boy had his noise-canceling headphones and his favorite stuffed wolf. The child touched his father's arm lightly, a gesture that meant "I'm okay," but the biker knew the day had bruised him in ways that might take time to unravel. He tried to breathe, but the betrayal lodged too deep. The waitress had been the only one in that place who saw his son as a human being, not an inconvenience, not a disruption, not a problem to be hurried past. People like her were rare. People who understood without being told. People who helped because they cared, not because it was their job. And she had been punished for it. As he stood there beside his bike, the biker felt a familiar rumble growing beneath the surface of his anger, the rumble of brotherhood, loyalty, and justice. The kind of justice that came not from violence, but from unity. From numbers. From presence. From making the world impossible to ignore. He took out his phone. What happened next would change the town forever. Back on the road, the biker replayed the scene in his head. The manager's words were sharp, clinical, slicing through the air like a blade. "You slowed everything down. You cost us time. You cost us money." The girl's eyes had filled with tears, not because she regretted helping, but because she was terrified of losing the job she desperately needed. She had opened her mouth to explain, but the manager had dismissed her with a wave of his hand, announcing her termination in a voice loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. The biker had clenched his teeth so hard he tasted iron. Compassion wasn't a weakness. It was humanity. And nobody should be punished for having it. He rode home heavy-hearted, his son leaning against the padded side of the sidecar, his eyes tracing patterns in the clouds above. When they arrived, the biker carried him inside, wrapped him in a blanket, and sat with him until his breathing slowed and steadied. Only once he was sure the boy felt safe again did the biker step out to his porch, the sky above now streaked with the deep orange of approaching dusk. He opened the group chat, a massive network of bikers from all over the region, men and women bound not by clubs but by a shared code: protect the vulnerable, defend kindness, stand for what is right. He told them what happened. He didn't embellish. He didn't dramatize. He simply explained that a waitress had been fired for helping his autistic son during a difficult moment. He didn't ask for anything. But brotherhood doesn't wait for permission. Phones across the state lit up. Messages exploded on the screen. Where is this restaurant? What time should we meet? Say the word. By midnight, the biker's phone buzzed with more notifications than he could count. Photos of bikes being fueled up. Screenshots of maps. People leaving work early. Riders from neighboring cities coordinating routes. Chapters combining forces. New groups forming just to join the ride. And then came the message that stunned him. We can get 1,000 bikes there. Easily. He stared at the screen, emotion swelling in his chest. These were men and women who had families, jobs, responsibilities. Riders who lived hours away. People who had no obligation to care about a waitress they had never met or a child they did not know. Yet they were willing to ride, not for revenge, not for chaos, not for intimidation, but to stand in solidarity, to show a young woman that kindness mattered, that the world had not turned entirely cold. The next morning, the sound came first, a low thunder rolling across the town, a vibration that shook windows and stirred hearts. People stepped outside, confused, looking toward the horizon as the noise grew louder, stronger, deeper. It wasn't a storm. It was a movement. A wave of chrome and leather and roaring engines poured into the streets, stretching beyond what the eye could track. Motorcycles lined the roads for blocks, riders from every background forming a wall of presence outside the restaurant. They didn't shout. They didn't cause trouble. They simply stood together, thousands of boots on the ground, thousands of engines rumbling in powerful unity. Inside, the manager froze. The fired waitress, standing across the street with tears in her eyes, had to cover her mouth as she realized what was happening. And at the center of it all, the biker stood beside his son, who watched the shining motorcycles with wide, fascinated eyes, gently tapping his fingertips together in excitement, a sign that he was overwhelmed, but in a good way. This time, the world wasn't too loud for him. This time, the world was loud for him. The riders formed a pathway, and slowly, the waitress stepped forward. One of the lead bikers handed her an envelope, a donation they had all contributed to. Enough to cover months of rent, bills, and support. Enough to give her breathing room. Enough to remind her that kindness was never a mistake. The biker looked at her with gratitude that words could never fully express. She had protected his son at his most vulnerable. Now, thousands were protecting her. As the engines rumbled around them in unison, she covered her face and cried. Not from sadness, but from feeling seen, valued, defended by strangers who understood the weight she carried. And somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, "This is what humanity looks like." As the emotional storm softened into a warm sunrise glow, the biker stood quietly, holding his son close. The waitress hugged him, thanking him for caring enough to tell the world what happened. His son rested his head on her shoulder, a gesture he rarely offered. It was his way of saying thank you. The restaurant would later face consequences for their actions, but that day wasn't about retaliation. It was about unity, compassion, solidarity. A reminder that one small act of kindness can ripple outward in ways no one could predict. When the last bike eventually rolled away, the town felt different. Kinder. More awake. More aware of the invisible battles families like his fought every single day. And the biker knew his son had witnessed something powerful, not cruelty, not rejection, but thousands of people rising up to defend kindness. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps keep meaningful stories alive and encourages kindness everywhere. Special request: before you leave, please comment "Kindness Matters" to let the world know compassion still exists.